Chapter 1, Ominous Omens. July 10th, 2025, 1432 Universal Time Coordinated. The first gamma ray burst hit, without warning. In the control room of the Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope, alarms blared as sensors registered an unprecedented spike in high-energy radiation. Dr. Emma Carter stared at the oscilloscope in disbelief, her coffee cup slipping from numb fingers and shattering on the linoleum floor. The readings were off the charts. This wasn't the typical millisecond-long burst from a distant supernova. This wave of gamma radiation had persisted for over 3 minutes, bathing the entire Earth in lethal rays. "Is this a malfunction?" One of her assistants shouted over the din. Emma shook her head, her eyes fixed on the real-time data streaming across multiple monitors. The radiation levels were fluctuating in a pattern that defied any known astrophysical model. "It's real," she said, her voice trembling. "Send an emergency alert to all NASA stations and the NOAA. We're looking at a global extinction-level event. Above the Earth's atmosphere, satellites began to malfunction, their electronics fried by the intense electromagnetic pulse, EMP. Accompanying the gamma rays, communication relays went dark one by one. In major cities around the world, power grids collapsed, plunging millions into darkness. The New York Stock Exchange descended into chaos as backup generators failed, and the Tokyo subway system ground to a halt, trapping thousands of commuters underground. Survival probability, 60%. In the quiet town of Flagstaff, Arizona, amateur astronomer Jack Harper had been stargazing with his vintage telescope when the sky erupted in a blinding flash. At first, he thought it was a meteor, but the glow persisted, casting an eerie greenish hue over the desert landscape. He rushed inside to check his radiation detector, which was now beeping frantically. The readings were in the red zone, far beyond what was safe for human exposure. Jack immediately called Emma, his former colleague from MIT. "Em, you need to see this. The gamma radiation, it's not just random. There's a rhythm to it like a heartbeat." Emma listened intently, scribbling down his observations. Jack had a knack for finding patterns in chaos, and if he said there was something strange, she knew to take it seriously. Back at the Fermi Telescope facility, the situation worsened. The second gamma ray burst arrived just as the first wave subsided, stronger than the last. The Earth's ozone layer, already weakened by decades of pollution, began to disintegrate at an alarming rate. Scientists watched in horror as satellite images showed the Antarctic ozone hole expanding exponentially, consuming the southern hemisphere like a voracious beast. July 11th, 2025, 3:08 Universal Time Coordinated. Governments around the world activated emergency protocols. In Washington, D.C., the president addressed the nation from a secure bunker. "My fellow Americans, we are facing a crisis of unprecedented proportions. The gamma ray storms have damaged our infrastructure, disrupted our power supply, and pose a grave threat to our health. But I want to assure you, we have been preparing for this. Operation Noah's Ark is now in effect. The plan, decades in the making, involved evacuating select individuals to a network of underground bunkers equipped with state-of-the-art life support systems. Scientists, engineers, doctors, anyone with skills deemed essential for humanity's survival, were given priority. But as news of the evacuation spread, panic ensued. Crowds gathered outside government buildings, demanding to be let in, while looting broke out in major cities as people fought over scarce resources. Emma was assigned to oversee the evacuation of Denver. As she stood on the tarmac of a military airfield, watching cargo planes loaded with supplies and equipment, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread. The sky above was a sickly yellow, the air thick with the smell of burning electronics and ozone. A mother holding a crying child approached her, desperation etched on her face. "Please, my daughter has asthma. She needs clean air." Emma bit her lip. acutely aware of the limited space in the bunkers. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "We can only take those on approved lists. Survival probability, 55%. Jack, meanwhile, had joined a team of scientists at the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C. Using a combination of old-fashioned analog computers and modern spectroscopy equipment, they were trying to decipher the origin of the gamma-ray bursts. "It doesn't match any known source," one of the researchers said, pointing to a series of graphs. "The energy distribution is all wrong for a natural event. It's almost as if—" Her voice trailed off, but the implication hung heavy in the air. Just then, the ground began to shake. Seismic activity, triggered by the gamma-ray-induced changes in the Earth's magnetic field, was causing tremors across the globe. In California, the San Andreas Fault showed signs of increased stress, while in Hawaii, volcanic activity at Kilauea intensified. The planet was lashing out, and humanity was ill-prepared to face the consequences. As the days passed, the situation grew more desperate. The third gamma-ray burst brought with it a surge of charged particles that disrupted the ionosphere, rendering all radio communication useless. The only way to communicate was through a network of old shortwave radios, and even those were unreliable. Food and water supplies were running low in many areas, and radiation sickness was starting to claim its first victims. Emma and Jack, separated by thousands of miles but united in their determination, continued to work around the clock. They knew that time was running out, and if they couldn't find a way to stop the gamma-ray storms, humanity's days were numbered. The survival probability counter, displayed prominently in every command center, ticked down with each passing hour, a constant reminder of the precariousness of their situation. Chapter 2, Escalation of the Disaster. July 12, 2025, 8 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The world reeled under successive gamma-ray bursts. In major cities, the lack of electricity plunged life into primitive darkness. Rioting broke out in London as food supplies ran low, and in Mumbai, hospitals were overwhelmed by patients suffering from radiation sickness. The ozone layer continued to deteriorate, and the sun, now a malevolent orb, burned the unprotected skin of those who dared to venture outside. Dr. Emma Carter, overseeing the Denver evacuation, was stretched to her limits. The military convoys were struggling to maintain order while transporting the selected survivors to the underground bunker. "Dr. Carter, we receive reports of looting at the 32nd Street warehouse," a soldier informed her. "They're after the remaining medical supplies." Emma gritted her teeth. Every syringe and vial of medicine was crucial for the survival of those in the bunker, but she couldn't spare the manpower to secure the warehouse. Meanwhile, Jack Harper at the Naval Observatory was engrossed in analyzing the gamma-ray data. The bursts, though erratic, displayed a concerning pattern. "These aren't random fluctuations," he told his team. "There's a correlation between the intensity of the gamma-ray flux and the Earth's magnetic field variations. It's as if the radiation is interacting with our planet's natural defenses." His findings were grim. The continuous onslaught of gamma rays was weakening the Earth's magnetosphere at an alarming rate. Survival probability, 52%. The global communication breakdown worsened the chaos. With satellites disabled and most radio frequencies saturated with interference, only a few shortwave stations remained operational. Governments resorted to using emergency broadcast systems, but the messages were often garbled and incomplete. In Beijing, the Chinese government managed to send out a coordinated plan for building makeshift radiation shelters, but it reached only a fraction of the intended population. In the United States, the federal government faced growing unrest. Protests erupted outside the White House, demanding transparency about the Noah's Ark operation. Why are the rich and powerful being saved while ordinary people are left to die? A protester shouted into a microphone. The reality was harsh. The limited capacity of the bunkers meant that tough decisions had to be made. Scientists, engineers, and medical professionals were prioritized, leaving many essential workers, like teachers and firefighters, in a precarious position. July 13, 2025, 14:23 Universal Time Coordinated. Emma's team encountered a major setback during the evacuation. A section of the highway leading to the bunker collapsed due to seismic activity triggered by the gamma ray-induced thermal stress on the Earth's crust. "We've lost a third of our supplies," a logistics officer reported, looking at the wreckage. "And we're running out of time. The next gamma ray burst is predicted to hit within 24 hours. Jack's research took a concerning turn. He discovered that the gamma ray radiation was causing chemical reactions in the upper atmosphere, producing harmful substances like nitric acid. "This isn't just about radiation exposure anymore," he warned in a transmission to Emma. "The acid rain resulting from these reactions will contaminate water sources and destroy crops. It's a double blow to our already fragile ecosystem." Back in Denver, Emma was forced to make difficult choices. She decided to abandon the evacuation of some outlying areas to focus on getting the core group of survivors and critical supplies to the bunker. "We have to prioritize the future of humanity," she told her team, her voice heavy with guilt. "I know it's cruel, but we don't have a choice." Survival probability, 48%. As the predicted time of the next gamma ray burst approached, panic spread like wildfire. In Sydney, thousands of people crowded the beaches, believing that being near the water would offer some protection. In Cairo, families huddled in basements, praying for the storm to pass. The World Health Organization, in its final broadcast, warned of a global health catastrophe if the radiation levels continued to rise. Inside the Naval Observatory, Jack and his team worked feverishly. They managed to piece together a rudimentary model of how the gamma ray bursts were affecting the Earth's climate system. "The radiation is heating the stratosphere unevenly," Jack explained. "This is disrupting the normal circulation patterns and could lead to extreme weather events, even more powerful than the ones we've already seen." July 14th, 2025, 3 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The fourth gamma ray burst hit with unprecedented force. The EMP accompanying it fried even the most robust electrical systems in the few areas that still had power. In the bunker construction sites, generators failed, halting the final preparations. Emma, who had just arrived at the bunker, watched in horror as the emergency lights flickered. "We need to get the shielding online now," she shouted, "or we're all dead." Jack, cut off from communication with Emma, continued his research alone. He noticed a new phenomenon. The gamma ray bursts were causing minor earthquakes in regions with high geothermal activity. "It's like the radiation is triggering a chain reaction in the Earth's mantle," he noted in his journal. "If this continues, we could see large-scale volcanic eruptions." The world seemed on the brink of collapse. Food shortages worsened, and the few remaining farms were destroyed by acid rain or radiation. In the bunker, construction crews worked around the clock to finish the life support systems, while doctors trained volunteers to handle the influx of radiation sickness patients. Survival probability, 45%. As the days passed, the situation grew more desperate. The fifth gamma ray burst, though less intense than the fourth, further weakened the Earth's magnetosphere. Scientists observed that the solar wind was now directly interacting with the upper atmosphere, stripping away oxygen at an accelerated rate. "We're running out of time," Jack muttered, looking at the latest data. "If we can't find a way to reverse this process, humanity has only weeks left." Emma, now in charge of the bunker's operations, faced internal strife. Arguments broke out among the evacuees over food rations and living spaces. "We're all in this together," she tried to reason with them, but her words fell on deaf ears. The stress and fear were turning people against each other, and she knew that maintaining order was just as crucial as survival itself. With the world in ruins and the future uncertain, Emma and Jack held on to a sliver of hope. They continued their work, driven by the knowledge that the fate of humanity rested on their shoulders. Every discovery, every calculation could be the key to saving what remained of the human race. Chapter 3. The Ark Beneath the Earth. July 15th, 2025, 2347 Universal Time Coordinated. The first convoy of armored trucks rumbled through the pitch-black streets of Denver, their headlights cutting through the acrid smoke lingering from earlier electrical fires. Inside the lead vehicle, Emma Carter clenched a flashlight in one hand and a waterproof binder of evacuation protocols in the other. Operation Noah's Ark was officially underway, but chaos was the only word that came to mind as she watched crowds of desperate civilians bang on the truck's reinforced windows. Dr. Carter, we're approaching Checkpoint Bravo. The driver shouted over the roar of the diesel engine. Civilian traffic is blocking the road. They're trying to follow us to the bunker. Emma peered through the tinted glass at the sea of makeshift lanterns and terrified faces. The bunker complex beneath the Rocky Mountains was designed to hold 5,000 people, scientists, engineers, medical professionals, and the essential 1% of humanity tasked with rebooting civilization. But to the tens of thousands trailing the convoy, it might as well have been the gates of Eden. Her radio crackled. "Emma, it's Jack. I've got something." Static swallowed his words, but she caught the urgency in his tone. "Hold on, I'm switching to the encrypted shortwave frequency," she replied, fumbling with the radio dial. The bunker's location was a closely guarded secret, but Jack had clearance. If anyone could decode the gamma ray storm's origins, it was him. Survival probability, 50%. Deep in the Naval Observatory's archives, Jack hunched over a decades-old spectrograph, its mechanical dials glowing in the dim light of a kerosene lamp. The gamma-ray data he'd collected showed a pattern, subtle but undeniable. The bursts weren't random. They pulsed in 187-second intervals, matching the rotational period of a neutron star. But no known neutron star in the Cygnus region had that period. Worse, the energy distribution matched a directed beam, not the omnidirectional emission of a natural GRB. "Someone built this," he murmured, tracing the oscilloscope's waveform. "A gamma-ray laser, focus on Earth. But how?" The implications were staggering. If an extraterrestrial civilization had weaponized stellar death, humanity was facing a threat beyond anything in military doctrine. He needed to get this data to Emma, to convince the government that this wasn't a natural disaster. It was an attack. Above ground, the evacuation convoy hit a roadblock. A group of farmers had parked tractors across the highway, demanding passage for their families. "We have livestock. Crops," a burly man shouted, slamming a fist on the truck's hood. "You can't just leave us to die." Emma sighed. She'd seen this coming. The bunker's life support systems couldn't handle livestock, and the harsh reality was that agriculture would be the least of the concerns if the ozone layer collapsed. "Sergeant, clear the road without force," she ordered. Use a loudspeaker. Explain that the mountain shelters can't sustain non-essential personnel. But her words fell hollow. What defined essential in the face of extinction? A pediatrician or a farmer? The decision had been made by algorithms that prioritize STEM expertise, leaving out entire professions deemed expendable. July 16th, 2025, 2:17 Universal Time Coordinated. Jack's Jeep skidded to a halt outside the bunker's secondary entrance, guarded by two soldiers with automatic rifles. "Dr. Harper, we weren't expecting. I don't care," Jack snapped, shoving his ID badge into the guard's face. "I need to speak to Emma Carter now. This isn't a natural gamma-ray burst. It's a target energy weapon, and whoever's firing it just increased the pulse frequency." Inside the bunker's command center, Emma studied the latest NOAA projections displayed on a vintage cathode ray tube. The ozone depletion had accelerated, with the Antarctic ozone hole expanding to cover South America. Surface UV radiation levels were now 800% above normal, turning unprotected skin into a second-degree burn in under 5 minutes. "We need to deploy the UV-resistant tarps over major cities," she told her team, "and start rationing the remaining sunscreen stocks. Every milliliter counts." Jack burst into the room, reeking of diesel and desperation. Look at this." He slammed a series of oscilloscope tracings on the desk. The gamma-ray bursts are periodic, synchronized with a gravitational wave signature I picked up from LIGO's backup data. It's not a neutron-star merger. It's a synthetic event, like someone's using a binary system as a particle accelerator. Emma's blood ran cold. "You're saying aliens are attacking us with gamma-ray laser?" Jack hesitated. "I'm saying the physics doesn't fit natural phenomena. The beam is too precise, too sustained. And look at this." He pointed to a graph showing the Earth's magnetic field fluctuations. "The pulses are designed to weaken our magnetosphere, like they're peeling an onion layer by layer. This is a disassembly process." Survival probability, 45%. In Houston, the last remaining NASA team struggled to launch a weather balloon equipped with a makeshift ozone monitor. The payload rose 20 kilometers before the gamma-ray flux fried its sensors, sending back a final image of stratosphere, a roiling mass of purple and black, as if the sky itself was bleeding. On the ground, a mother applied the last of her baby's diaper cream as a makeshift sunblock, crying as the lotion burned her child's already irritated skin. Back in the bunker, the first wave of evacuees arrived. Disheveled scientists clutching hard drives, engineers dragging obsolete analog computers, and a handful of politicians who'd commandeered their own convoys. The mood was tense. Arguments broke out over bunk assignments, with a Nobel laureate in physics screaming at a biologist that my work is more critical to human survival. Emma mediated the conflicts while Jack continued his analysis in the bunker's makeshift lab. Using a 1980s-era mainframe computer, the only system immune to EMP, he cross-referenced the gamma-ray pulses with historical astronomical data. What he found chilled him. The beam's point of origin matched the coordinates of a star system that had been silently dimming for the past decade, a red dwarf star named Gliese 710, predicted to pass within 1.3 light-years of the Sun in 1.8 million years. But Gliese 710 was 63 light-years away, or at least it should have been. The gamma-ray beam's trajectory suggested it was emanating from within the Oort cloud, the hypothetical sphere of comets at the Sun's edge. "Impossible," Jack muttered, "unless they're using the star itself as a lens, focusing its energy." The theory was straight out of sci-fi, a Dyson sphere-like structure harnessing a star's output, repurposed into a directional weapon. 4:32 Universal Time Coordinated. The bunker's emergency lights flickered as another EMP wave hit, though the shielding held. Emma stood at the entrance, watching the last of the official convoy arrive. Only 3,200 people, far short of the 5,000 capacity. The rest had been delayed by lootings, vehicular breakdowns, or simply overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the disaster. A young girl, no older than 8, clung to her mother's leg, staring at Emma with wide, haunted eyes. "Will the monsters in the sky go away?" she whispered. Emma knelt, forcing a smile. "We're going to fix it, sweetie. That's why we're here." But the lie tasted bitter. She had no idea if they could fix a threat that originated beyond the stars. Jack's voice echoed through the bunker's intercom. "All scientific personnel to the lab. I have something to show you." Dozens of researchers crowded into the tiny room, where Jack projected a map of the solar system. "The gamma-ray source isn't in Cygnus," he announced. "It's a misdirection. The real beam is coming from the direction of the sun, but we can't see it Because it's hidden by the solar corona. Murmurs of disbelief. That's impossible, said a senior geophysicist. The sun's gravity would distort any beam. Not if they're using gravitational lenses around the sun, Jack interrupted. Think of it as a cosmic periscope. They're bending the gamma rays around the sun's mass to hide the true origin. The implications were nauseating. If the attackers were using the sun itself as a camouflage, their technology was centuries, millennia, beyond humanity's. And it meant the gamma-ray storm could continue indefinitely, as long as the enemy maintained control of their stellar weapon. 6:15 Universal Time Coordinated. On the surface, the first volcanic eruptions began. The gamma-ray-induced mantle disturbances had destabilized the Yellowstone caldera, causing magma to rise at an unprecedented rate. Satellite imagery from the last functioning spy satellite showed plumes of ash erupting from the Pacific Ring of Fire, blending with the already toxic atmosphere. The ash would block sunlight, triggering a nuclear winter, if the gamma rays didn't kill most life first. In the bunker's medical bay, doctors treated the first cases of radiation sickness. A family who'd spent hours outdoors during the evacuation showed symptoms: nausea, hair loss, bleeding gums. There was no cure, only palliative care. The chief medical officer, Dr. Elena Marquez, pulled Emma aside. We have enough anti-radiation meds for 500 people. At this rate, we'll run out in 48 hours. Emma nodded, her mind already calculating. Prioritize scientists, engineers, anyone with skills needed for post-disaster reconstruction. The rest? She pushed the thought away. This was survival of the technically fittest, a harsh Darwinism she'd never imagined endorsing. Survival probability, 40%. Jack's team made another breakthrough. The gamma-ray pulses were interfering with Earth's core dynamics, causing the inner core to rotate faster. This explained the magnetic field anomalies and the deep ocean tremors. The planet's very heart was being destabilized. It's like they're trying to stop the Earth from spinning, Jack told Emma, his voice trembling. Or at least, disrupt its geodynamo enough to kill the magnetic field entirely. Without the magnetic field, the solar wind would strip the atmosphere in centuries, but the gamma-ray attack was doing it in days. Emma stared at the survival probability counter, now at 40%. They were losing ground faster than any model predicted. Just then, a junior researcher burst into the lab. Dr. Harper, the gamma-ray flux, it's modulating. There's a pattern in the pulses, like a signal. Jack rushed to the spectrograph, where the oscilloscope now displayed a series of repeating peaks and troughs, almost like binary code. It can't be, he breathed. They're sending a message. The team worked furiously to decode the signal, using every available analog computer. After 3 hours, they had a translation, or at least a best guess. The repeating sequence matched the number of protons in Earth's atmosphere, the distance of the moon, and one final number, 37. The universal constant of water's contact angle, a key factor in Earth's habitability. It's a catalog, Jack realized. They're listing our planet's vital signs, like they're taking inventory before. Before what? Harvesting? Eradicating? The last possibility hung in the air, unspoken but undeniable. 9 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. Emma convened a crisis meeting. The bunker's leadership debated whether to respond to the signal, assuming it was a message. Some argued for silence, fearing provocation. Others wanted to broadcast a peace signal using the last remaining radio telescope in West Virginia. We don't even know if they understand us, said a political advisor. For all we know, this is just a byproduct of their technology, not a deliberate message. But Jack disagreed. The precision is too perfect. They know we're here. They're probably watching our every move. As the debate raged, a new threat emerged. The bunker's air filtration system was failing. The gamma-ray-induced ozone depletion had allowed nitric oxide levels to skyrocket, and the activated charcoal filters couldn't keep up. Residents complained of headaches, shortness of breath, symptoms of nitrogen dioxide poisoning. Emma ordered a shutdown of all non-essential air vents and began rationing oxygen tanks meant for medical use. It was a temporary fix, but every hour counted. She wondered if this was how civilization ended, not with a bang, but with a series of desperate, incremental failures. 11:47 Universal Time Coordinated. Jack stepped outside the bunker for the first time in 12 hours, wearing a full-body radiation suit. The sky was a constant, eerie glow, the stars blotted out by the gamma-ray storm's afterglow. He looked toward the east, where the first rays of a sunless dawn should have been. Instead, there was only the sickly green haze, punctuated by distant lightning from ash clouds. He thought of Emma, of the impossible choices she was making, of the little girl who'd asked about monsters in the sky. Were the attackers truly malicious? Or was this some cosmic accident, a misdirected experiment by a civilization that didn't realize Earth was inhabited? The answer, he knew, didn't matter. What mattered was survival. And for the first time, Jack allowed himself to consider the unthinkable. Maybe the best humanity could hope for was to become a footnote in the universe, a species that fought until the end, even if no one would ever know they'd existed. But no, he shook his head. The gamma-ray signal included Earth's vital signs. They knew we were here, which meant they might be waiting for a response. Jack turned back toward the bunker, his resolve hardening. If this was a war, humanity wouldn't go quietly. They'd fight with every scrap of science, every ounce of ingenuity, until the last gamma ray faded or the last heart stopped beating. Chapter 4. The Dark Winter Descends. July 17th, 2025. 4 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The first eruption of Yellowstone tore through the Earth's crust. Jack stood in the bunker's surface monitoring station, peering through radiation-proof glass at the northwest horizon. Where the outline of the Rocky Mountains should have been, a mushrooming column of ash now rose instead. Volcanic ash spread eastward at 200 kilometers per hour, and according to USGS models, it would blanket the entire North American continent within 48 hours. VEI 7 eruption, he muttered into the intercom, 100 times more powerful than Mount St. Helens in 1980. The radiation detector in his hand went into overdrive as radioactive materials in the ash synergized with gamma rays to push surface radiation doses to lethal thresholds. Unprotected exposure for 1 hour would now cause acute radiation sickness. Emma's voice echoed from the bunker's depths. Jack, medical reports show antibiotic stocks are critical. Plus, nitrate levels in Reservoir 3 are 300% over the limit. Her tone carried a weariness he'd never heard before. She'd been working 36 straight hours since entering the bunker, and the crises multiplied like Hydra heads, gnawing at humanity's last refuge. Survival probability, 35%. 500 meters underground. The command center's holographic map flashed red alerts. Emma studied real-time satellite imagery of the Pacific Ring of Fire. Mount Fuji in Japan and Mount Etna in Italy erupted simultaneously, forming an ash belt spanning 12 time zones. This isn't a coincidence, geologist Rajiv croaked. Gamma rays heated the mantle, triggering a global volcanic chain reaction. Our planet is running a planetary fever. In Bunker Sector C, young Lily cowered in a corner, clutching the doll her mother had left before succumbing to radiation sickness during evacuation. She listened to distant arguing, her eyes wide with terror at what the future might hold. The deadliest threat lurked in the ash itself. Jack's team discovered its microscopic particles absorbed free radicals ionized by gamma rays, acting like miniature radiation bombs that cause chemical burns on contact with skin. Worse, The stratospheric ash layer reflected sunlight, and NOAA climate models predicted a 6 degrees Celsius global temperature drop within 2 weeks, reducing crop photosynthesis by 40%, a faster ecological stranglehold than nuclear winter. Across the globe, African savannas saw a herd of animals collapsing from the sudden climate and radiation shocks, their bodies piling up in putrid heaps. 7:15 Universal Time Coordinated. The bunker's air circulation system blared a piercing alarm. Filtered air still smelled of sulfur, signaling sulfur dioxide from the ash was breaching the shields. Emma activated reserve oxygen tanks, watching the gauge plummet from 85%. She knew this was counting down everyone's survival clock. "We need a surface cleanup crew," she ordered the security captain. "Take graphite fiber filters and repair Vent 3. But as volunteers struggled into 50 kilograms radiation suits, she knew this was a suicide mission. Surface radiation now measured 500 μsV/H, 10 times the occupational exposure limit. Among them was Tom, a middle-aged man who'd volunteered to give his daughter a better chance in the bunker. He kissed her forehead through his faceplate before stepping into the unknown. In the lab, Jack pieced together final data. He'd found precise negative correlation between gamma-ray burst frequency and inner core rotation speed. Every 12 bursts accelerated the core by 0.001 seconds. "This is Earth's final heartbeat," he told the gathered scientists. "Core instability is tearing apart the magnetosphere. Our shield is down to 23% effectiveness." In a corner, a young scientist surreptitiously logged these findings, calculating if selling them could buy survival. 11 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The first radiation rain hit Denver. Black droplets mixed with ash pummeled the bunker roof, registering a pH of 2.1, more corrosive than battery acid. Agricultural experts reported the last underground wheat seedlings wilting within 12 hours, their leaves speckled with radioactive burns. Even GMO strains couldn't survive combined assault. In the hydroponics bay, an agronomist knelt beside the dead crops, tears falling over years of research reduced to nothing. Social collapse worsened. A group of engineers stormed the medical bay, demanding the last anti-radiation drugs. "We keep life support running. We're more essential," Emma called in guards. But seeing guns train on former colleagues, she realized the bunker civilization was repeating surface chaos. In the scuffle, an engineer hit his head on a sharp edge, bleeding profusely as others trampled past. "We're not building an ark. We're building a coffin." Dr. Chin laughed hollowly, wiping his faceplate after logging the 37th radiation death. "Viruses are mutating too. Gamma rays are shredding RNA chains, pushing flu mortality to 45%. In the infirmary, a nurse bit her lip as she prepared a deceased patient for storage, her exhaustion etched deep into her face. Survival probability, 30%. Jack's latest discovery offered a final hope. Analyzing ash samples, he found iron-nickel micrograins could neutralize some radiation radicals. "It's like applying sunscreen to the planet," he showed Emma microscope images. "Aerosolizing the ash and spraying it into the stratosphere might create a temporary radiation barrier." The desperate plan required the last 2 modified helicopters. Emma studied the fuel reserves. A one-way trip would burn 40% of their stock, and pilots would navigate radiation zones blind. She didn't hesitate. "Prep the crew. Take all available graphite fiber. This is our last shot at a sunshade." In the pilot ready room, 2 aviators checked their gear, clapping each other on the shoulder with a mix of tension and resolve. As the helicopters roared into the ashen sky, Jack noticed an abnormal gamma-ray flux fluctuation. The pulse interval stretched from 187 to 212 seconds, like the universe adjusting its breath. He suddenly recalled the 1997 GRB 9-70508 afterglow model. This periodicity matched gravitational wave oscillations from a collapsing star. "Emma," he said shakily. "The gamma ray source isn't a weapon. It's a dying magnetar, its rotation decay sweeping Earth with energy beams. We're not being attacked. We're just in the cosmic crosshairs." The news spread to the bunker, eliciting cries of despair and stunned silence. 16:45 Universal Time Coordinated. The first helicopter crash report came in. Radar showed it disintegrating over Colorado Springs, likely due to residual EMP frying avionics. The second helicopter went dark after releasing its last aerosol canister. The pilot's final message: "Ash curtain forming visibility," then silence. In the command center, Emma staggered as the signal died, caught by a nearby technician. Surface radiation dropped 15% thanks to the stratospheric barrier, but it wasn't enough. Emma watched the survival counter tick to 25%, remembering her father's words when she became an emergency manager. "Humans think we're masters of nature. We're just tenants." In the bunker library, an elder pored over ancient texts, searching for historical wisdom in humanity's darkest hour. Late that night, Jack visited the bunker's astronomical well. Through the radiation-proof telescope, he saw the anomalous light in Cygnus, not a malicious muzzle, but a magnetar's final spasms. It had 72 hours left before its beam shifted. Would Earth survive that long? "We're cosmic dust," he murmured into the dark. "But at least we try to shine in the dust." Outside the well, a young guard stood at attention, gripping his rifle tighter after overhearing, determined to protect what little remained. 23:59 Universal Time Coordinated. When the new gamma ray pulse hit, the core rotation speed jumped 0.01 seconds. The entire bunker groaned with metallic protest. "Lights out for 30 seconds. Emma grabbed Jack's hand, an emergency red glow. Their first physical contact in 20 years of collaboration. "Whatever happens," her voice steady amid the tremors, "we prove that when facing extinction, humanity chooses defiance over fear." Across the bunker, people clung to each other in the dark, finding strength in shared warmth. Unsure if they'd see the sun again, but unbroken in spirit. The survival counter froze at 22%. On the surface, the ash-choked dark winter swallowed the last sunlight, as if Earth had prepped its own funeral. Yet in the ruins worldwide, tiny fires flickered, survivors still fighting, their forms small but unyielding, writing humanity's tenacious epilogue in the wake of the apocalypse. Chapter 5, The Last Dawn, July 20th, 2025, 9 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The gamma ray flux dropped precipitously at 3:17 Universal Time Coordinated, as if the cosmos had suddenly held its breath. Jack noticed a change first, watching the spectrograph's needles relax from their manic dance. "The magnetar's beam is shifting," he told Emma over the intercom, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Radiation levels are down 60%. It's our first reprieve in 9 days." The bunker's inhabitants emerged into a world transformed. The ash-choked sky had lightened to a murky gray, and the constant hum of radiation detectors faded to a reassuring tick. Emma ordered limited surface missions. Engineers to assess infrastructure, scientists to collect atmospheric data, and scouts to search for surviving vegetation. Lieutenant Marcus Riley led the first reconnaissance team. His boots crunched on ash that had settled like coarse snow, 6 inches deep across Denver streets. "Reporting 0 visible plant life," he said into his radio, sweeping the Geiger counter across a desiccated maple tree. "Radiation's down to 80 MUSV/H, tolerable for 2 hours with minimal protection." In the command center, Emma studied satellite feeds rebooted by the temporary radiation lull. The global temperature had dropped 4.2 degrees Celsius, but the stratospheric ash veil showed first signs of dispersion over the Atlantic. "It's not a miracle," Rajiv cautioned, "just a pause in the storm. That magnetar has one final burst in it. Our seismic sensors detect its rotational decay accelerating. Survival probability, 25%. The reprieve brought temporary hope, but not safety. The bunker's hydroponics bay, once a symbol of resilience, now held only brown stalks and moldering roots. Agronomist Dr. Mei Lin knelt among the ruins, clutching a datapad filled with failed experiments. Even if we could grow crops, she told Emma, the soil's poisoned with radioactive cesium-137. We have 3 weeks of emergency rations left. Social tensions exploded in the mess hall. A group of miners demanded more food, pounding tables as their leader shouted, "You bureaucrats keep the scientists fed while we starve." Emma faced them flanked by guards, acutely aware of the fragility of their makeshift society. "We're all on half rations," she said evenly, "but if you riot, no one survives. Help us refine volcanic ash into fertilizer, then we all eat." Jack's team made a critical discovery in the ash deposits. Microscopic glass spheres, formed during the volcanic eruptions, contained trace elements that neutralize gamma-ray-induced radicals. "It's not a solution," he admitted to Emma, showing a petri dish where irradiated moss clung to spheres, "but could buy us time to reinforce the bunker's radiation shields." 14:30 Universal Time Coordinated. The second surface team returned with grim news. Denver's main water treatment plant lay in ruins, its filters clogged with radioactive silt. Worse, they'd encountered roving gangs of survivors from a nearby refugee camp, armed with scavenged weapons. They asked about the bunker. Riley reported, his jaw tight, said they'd heard rumors of a safe haven in the mountains. Emma cursed softly. The bunker's location was supposed to be secret, but desperation had sharpened humanity's instincts. She activated the emergency broadcast system, her voice echoing through the concrete halls. All non-essential personnel to engineering decks. We're fortifying the blast doors. In the astronomical well, Jack tracked the magnetar's final stages. Its rotational period had dropped to 179 seconds, signaling an imminent collapse into a black hole. "The final burst will be 10 times stronger," he told Emma, scrolling through gravitational wave data. "It'll either destroy the last of the ozone layer or, well, there is no or that." 1900 hours Universal Time Coordinated. The first attack came at dusk. Gunfire rattled the north ventilation shaft, followed by the scream of cutting torches. Emma watched on security cameras as shadowy figures breached the outer airlock, their clothes tattered, faces wrapped in ash-stained cloth. "They're using metal pipes as battering rams," a guard shouted. "We can't hold them long." She made a split-second decision. "Release the fire suppression foam in Sector A," she ordered, "and prepare the emergency airlock seal." The foam, designed to combat radiation leaks, would buy precious minutes, but also meant flooding the only accessible entrance with corrosive chemicals. In the chaos, young Lily wandered from her dorm, drawn by the commotion. She huddled behind a utility cart as armed survivors poured into the corridor, their shouts mixing with the hissing foam. A man with a rusted knife turned toward her, but before he could move, Tom emerged from the smoke, tackling him to the ground. The scuffle ended with a gunshot. Tom lay still, a dark stain spreading on his chest. Survival probability, 20%. The assault left 12 dead, including 3 bunker residents. As Tom's body was carried to morgue, his daughter clung to Emma, silent tears staining her cheeks. "He saved me," she whispered, and Emma felt a sharp pang of guilt. How many more would die for this fragile sanctuary? Jack's final model painted a stark picture. The magnetar's death throes would occur in 47 hours, unleashing a gamma-ray pulse that would penetrate even the bunker's shields. "We have 2 choices," he said, projecting a timeline onto command center wall. "Stay and face certain radiation poisoning, or gamble on the surface." The surface option seemed suicidal. Temperatures hovered at -15 degrees Celsius, Radiation levels were still lethal for prolonged exposure, and hostile survivors roamed the ruins. But Emma saw a slim chance. The Pacific Northwest, shielded by the Cascades, might have lower ash accumulation. "We'll use the remaining fuel to reach the Oregon caves," she announced. "Their natural rock formations offer better radiation protection than anything we built." July 21st, 2025, 1 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The evacuation plan was chaos. With only 6 functional trucks, priority went to children, scientists, and medical supplies. Arguments erupted as engineers demanded space for their equipment, while elderly residents refused to take seats from younger survivors. "We don't have time for this," Emma shouted over the din. "Either we leave together or we die together." Lily clutched her doll tighter. As she climbed into a truck, Tom's loss still raw. Beside her, Dr. Lynn cradled a box of irradiated moss samples, their last hope for future agriculture. The convoy departed at 2 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated, headlights cutting through the ash in faint yellow cones. Jack stayed behind to rig the bunker's remaining generators as a distraction. He shook Emma's hand before she left, a rare smile on his face. "Tell the world we fought," he said, "and maybe the universe will remember." 5:30 Universal Time Coordinated. The journey north was a nightmare. The first truck broke down in Boulder, its engine seized by ash particles. Riley's team scavenged parts from a crashed military vehicle, but 3 scouts were lost to radiation sickness during the delay. By dawn, the convoy had shrunk to 4 trucks, their passengers shivering in sub-zero temperatures. In the lead vehicle, Emma monitored a handheld Geiger counter. Radiation levels fluctuated wildly, spiking whenever they passed molten rock fissures opened by the eruptions. "We're losing too many," the driver muttered, nodding at a corpse half buried in ash. Another victim of the dark winter. 11 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. They reached the Oregon caves at midday, greeted by a wall of solid basalt. The natural cave system offered 30 meters of rock shielding, reducing radiation to 30 μsV/H, survivable with minimal precautions. Dr. Lynn immediately set up a makeshift lab, using the cave's damp microclimate to nurture her moss samples. Jack's final transmission came at 1400 hours Universal Time Coordinated, garbled but triumphant. "The magnetar's collapsing," he said. "Last burst in 12 hours. Tell Lily. Tell her father was brave." Then static. Emma stood at the cave entrance, watching the horizon. The sky had cleared slightly, revealing stars blotted by the magnetar's dying glow. Beside her, Lily looked up, her voice small. "Will the stars still be there tomorrow?" 2300 hours Universal Time Coordinated. The final gamma ray burst arrived without warning. The sky ignited in a kaleidoscope of colors, greens, purples, and unnatural blues, as the magnetar collapsed into a black hole. Emma hugged Lily tight, feeling the cave walls vibrate with the electromagnetic fury. The Geiger counter screamed, then died. When the light faded, the world was silent. Emma stepped outside, her radiation suit's sensors registering a surreal calm. The magnetar's beam had shifted, its energy now aimed at empty space. The ozone layer, what little remained, began its slow, agonizing repair. July 22nd, 2025, 6 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The survival probability counter, now a rusted relic in the abandoned bunker, read 18%. But in the Oregon caves, life stirred. Dr. Lynn's moss had taken root in ash-amended soil, its green shoots a defiant splash of color. Riley's team returned from a scouting mission, reporting faint radio signals from a Canadian research station. Emma held Lily's hand as they watched the sun rise, a dim, reddened orb, but a promise. The dark winter would last years, maybe decades, but humanity had survived the worst. They were cosmic dust, yes, but dust that refused to settle. "We'll rebuild," she said more to herself and the girl. Not as masters, but as survivors. And that's enough. The first snow of a new era began to fall, mixing with ash to form a strange, fertile sludge. Somewhere, beneath the weight of the world, a seedling stirred, proof that even in the darkest dawn, life found a way. Chapter 6, Fractured Alliances. August 15th, 2025, 7 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. 1 month after taking refuge in the Oregon caves, the survivors' tenuous peace began to fray at the edges. Emma Carter crouched beside a makeshift water filtration system, watching Dr. Maylin test the latest batch of treated water. The biofilm-coated rocks, harvested from the cave's natural streams, managed to reduce strontium 90 levels, but the process consumed precious energy. pH is stable at 6.5, Lynn reported, frowning at her test strips. But we're losing 20% of the water to evaporation. At this rate, we'll need to ration drinking supplies by next week. Emma sighed, rubbing her temples. The cave's natural ventilation system, once a blessing, now accelerated water loss. Double the tarp coverage over the collection pools. And send a team to explore the western tunnels. There might be an underground reservoir. Survival probability, 18%. In the communal living quarters, Lily Harper huddled with a group of children, sorting through meager rations of irradiated wheat. Her fingers traced the bioluminescent veins on the grain, a reminder of Jack's research. At 15, she'd become the de facto caretaker for the younger survivors, teaching them basic botany using the cave's limited resources. Miss Lily, why does the wheat glow? A 6-year-old named Max asked, eyes wide. Radiation changes DNA, she explained gently, like how the ash changed the color of the sky, but we're learning to make it safe. Her words belied the unease in her stomach. 3 residents had already fallen ill with radiation-induced stomach ulcers. 11:30 Universal Time Coordinated. The peace shattered with the arrival of a scouting party. Riley, now limping from a radiation burn on his leg, burst into the command center. We found another group, about 30 people, camped near Crater Lake. They're armed with crossbows and have a cache of solar panels. Emma's heart skipped a beat. Solar panels meant electricity, a luxury they'd long abandoned. Did they say anything about their intentions? They demanded our water purification tech. Said if we don't share, they'll cut off our access to the surface trails. Riley's hand tightened on his rifle. They're led by a woman named Ana Velasquez. She's intense. That evening, Velasquez arrived at the cave entrance with a small delegation. Her leather jacket, patched with radiation-resistant fabric, crackled as she approached. Emma Carter, I presume, she said, voice like gravel. We've been watching your movements. Your biofilm filters could save my people. Emma squared her shoulders. And your solar panels could power our ventilation systems. We trade or we both suffer. Velasquez's laugh was short and bitter. You think this is a negotiation? We control the only passable route to the coast. Without us, your scouts won't last a day in the ash storms. The standoff lasted 3 days. Both groups positioned guards along the cave perimeter, tensions rising with each passing hour. Gareth Hume, the former soldier, advocated for a preemptive strike. They'll take what we have and leave us to die, he argued in the council meeting. We should hit them first. Emma shook her head. We're not murderers. We'll offer a joint research project. Combine their solar tech with our water filters. If they refuse, she looked at the survival probability counter, now flickering at 16%. We'll prepare for war. 1,500 hours Universal Time Coordinated. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lily, accompanied by 2 younger children, stumbled upon a hidden chamber while exploring the caves. Bioluminescent fungi carpeted the walls, their glow revealing a network of underground streams. More astonishingly, the water tested almost completely free of radiation. Dr. Lin, Emma, Lily's shout echoed through the tunnels. We found a natural spring. The rock formations must have filtered out the cesium. 137. The discovery changed the power dynamic. Emma invited Velasquez to inspect the spring, then proposed a new deal. Shared access to the water source in exchange for exclusive rights to the solar panels. We build a pipeline system between our camps. She said, your people get clean water, and we get electricity. Everyone wins. Velasquez studied the spring for hours, her expression unreadable. Finally, she extended her hand. Temporary alliance. But if you betray us, I'll personally feed you to the ashworms. 1900 hours universal time coordinated. The alliance brought immediate relief. Solar-powered pumps circulated water through the caves, while the biofilm filters removed remaining contaminants. But integration proved challenging. Velasquez's people, accustomed to a hierarchical structure, clashed with the Oregon Caves Democratic Council. One night, a fight broke out in the shared mess hall. A young man from Velasquez's camp accused Dr. Lin of hoarding medical supplies. You think you're better than us because you wear a lab coat? He sneered, knocking over a tray of irradiated vegetables. Emma intervened before the situation escalated. We're all on the same side, she shouted. If we can't work together, the Magnetar might as well have finished us off. Her words silenced the room, but the resentment lingered. September 1st, 2025, 3 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. A magnitude 6.8 earthquake struck the Cascades, sending shock waves through the caves. Lily woke to the sound of collapsing rock, her heart pounding in her chest. In the darkness, she heard cries for help and the hiss of escaping steam. Stay calm, she shouted, groping for her radiation mask. Everyone, follow the emergency lights. Guided by the bioluminescent markings on the walls, she led a group of children to the central cavern. When the tremor subsided, the damage became clear. The water pipeline to Velasquez's camp had ruptured, and a section of the solar panel array lay shattered. Velasquez stormed into the command center, fury in her eyes. You call this an alliance? Your shoddy construction cost us our water supply. Emma bit back a retort. The earthquake affected both our camps. We'll work together to repair the damage. But Velasquez was already marching out, barking orders to her guards. 1400 hours Universal Time Coordinated. As the survivors began repairs, a new threat emerged. A thick, acidic fog rolled in from the coast, carried by strong easterly winds. The fog burned exposed skin on contact and corroded metal surfaces within minutes. Dr. Lin's analysis revealed high concentrations of sulfuric acid, likely a byproduct of volcanic activity. We need to seal all the ventilation shafts, Lin warned, and ration oxygen. This could last for days. Emma radioed Velasquez, hoping for a united response. We should pool our resources. Your people can help reinforce the cave entrances. Velasquez's reply was cold. Your problems are your own. We're fortifying our camp. Don't come near us until the fog clears. Survival probability, 14%. Isolated once again, the Oregon Cave survivors faced a race against time. Gareth led a team to patch the ventilation systems, while Lily and Dr. Lin developed a makeshift mask using charcoal from the cave's ancient campfires and layers of biofilm. We'll need to rotate shifts, Emma announced, her voice strained. No one goes outside without double protection, and pray this fog lifts before our oxygen runs out. In the darkest hours of the night, as the fog pressed against the cave walls, Lily sat by the emergency generator, thinking of Jack and Tom. Their sacrifices hadn't been in vain, she told herself. Humans were adaptable, resilient, even when the world seemed determined to crush them. The fog lifted 4 days later, leaving behind a landscape bleached white by acid. But the survivors emerged, battered yet unbroken. Velasquez's camp remained silent, their alliance hanging by a thread. And in the ashes of conflict and disaster, the fight for survival continued, as fierce and unpredictable as ever. Chapter 7. The Echoes of Desperation. August 1st, 2026. A year had passed since the survivors took refuge in the Oregon caves, and the initial relief of finding a haven had given way to a relentless battle for survival. The once promising bioluminescent wheat crops, which had shown such potential, now lay in ruins. Dr. Maylin, her eyes sunken from sleepless nights, hunched over a microscope in the dimly lit laboratory. The air was thick with the smell of decay, a constant reminder of the failed harvests. "Another batch ruined," she muttered, slumping back in her chair. "The radiation-induced mold is mutating faster than we can keep up. At this rate, we'll run out of food within a month." Her words hung heavy in the air, a death sentence to the community. In the command center, Emma Carter studied the dwindling supply charts with a growing sense of dread. The survival probability counter, which once seemed like a distant statistic, now felt like a ticking time bomb. "We're down to our last reserves," she informed the council. "We need to find a new source of food, and fast." Survival probability, 14%. Lily Harper, now 17, had become an integral part of the community. She spent her days exploring the outer reaches of the cave system, searching for any signs of edible plants or animals. Despite the constant danger of radiation exposure and the threat of mutated creatures, she refused to give up. "There has to be something out there," she would say, her eyes filled with determination. One day, while exploring a previously untouched section of the caves, Lily stumbled upon a small chamber filled with strange, glowing mushrooms. Her heart raced as she carefully collected samples, hoping against hope that they might be a viable food source. Back in the laboratory, she and Dr. Lin worked tirelessly to analyze the mushrooms, testing for toxins and nutritional value. "These could be the answer to our prayers," Dr. Lin exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement. "They're high in protein and seem to be resistant to radiation, but we need to be cautious. We'll start with small test batches and monitor the effects closely." Meanwhile, tensions were rising within the community. The constant struggle for resources had taken its toll on the survivors, and tempers were short. Gareth Hume, the former soldier, had become increasingly vocal in his demands for a more aggressive approach. "We can't just sit here and wait to die," he shouted at a council meeting. "We need to go out there and take what we need." Emma tried to reason with him. "We're all in this together, Gareth. If we start attacking other groups, we'll only make things worse. We need to focus on cooperation and finding peaceful solutions." But her words fell on deaf ears. Gareth and his followers were growing more and more restless, and it was only a matter of time before something gave. 9 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The situation took a turn for the worse when a group of raiders attacked the cave. They came in the dead of night, armed with makeshift weapons and driven by desperation. The sound of gunfire and shouting echoed through the tunnels, waking everyone from their fitful sleep. Emma sprang into action, rallying the defenders. "We can't let them take our home," she shouted, her voice filled with determination. "Fight for your lives." The battle was fierce, with both sides suffering heavy losses. In the chaos, Lily found herself face to face with one of the raiders, a young man with wild eyes and a desperate look on his face. "Please," he begged, his voice trembling. "We're starving. We just want some food." Lily hesitated, her heart torn between compassion and the need to protect her community. But before she could make a decision, a shot rang out, and the young man fell to the ground. The raiders were eventually driven back, but the damage had been done. Several of the survivors had been killed or injured, and the community was left reeling. Emma stood over the bodies of the fallen, her eyes filled with tears. "This is what desperation does to people," she said softly. "We can't let this happen again." 1,500 hours Universal Time Coordinated. In the aftermath of the attack, the community came together to mourn their losses and rebuild. But the incident had left a deep scar, and trust was in short supply. Emma knew that they needed to find a way to unite the survivors, or they would surely perish. She called a meeting of the council and proposed a radical solution. "We need to reach out to other communities," she said. "We can't survive on our own. By working together, we can share resources, knowledge, and skills. It's our only hope." The council was divided. Some argued that it was too risky, that they couldn't trust other groups. But Emma was determined. "We have to try," she said. "What other choice do we have?" With the council's reluctant approval, Emma sent out a small team of scouts to search for other survivors. It was a dangerous mission, but one that could mean the difference between life and death for the community. 2,000 hours Universal Time Coordinated. As the days passed, the scouts finally returned with news. They had found a small community of survivors living in a nearby valley. The community was led by a woman named Anna, who was initially wary of the Oregon Cave survivors. But after some persuasion, she agreed to meet with Emma. The meeting was tense, with both sides eyeing each other suspiciously. But as they began to talk, they realized that they had more in common than they thought. Anna's community was also struggling to survive, and they were in desperate need of food and supplies. Emma proposed a trade. "We have the technology to purify water and grow crops," she said. "In exchange, we need your help with hunting and gathering. By working together, we can both survive." Anna was hesitant at first, but she could see the sense in Emma's proposal. "Okay," she said finally. "We'll give it a try. But if this doesn't work, we're on our own." Survival probability, 15%. The alliance between the two communities was a slow and difficult process. There were cultural differences, mistrust, and arguments over resources. But gradually, they began to learn to work together. The Oregon Cave survivors shared their knowledge of agriculture and water purification, while Anna's community taught them how to hunt and trap the mutated animals that roamed the area. Lily, in particular, formed a close bond with Anna's daughter, a young girl named Maya. The two of them spent hours exploring the valley, sharing stories and dreams of a better future. "Maybe one day we'll be able to rebuild the world," Lily said, looking out at the ash-covered landscape. "Maybe we'll be able to see the sun again." As the weeks passed, the two communities began to thrive. The food situation improved, and the survivors' spirits lifted. For the first time in a long time, there was hope, but Emma knew that the road ahead was still long and difficult. The dark winter was far from over, and there were still many challenges to face. One night, as she lay in bed, thinking about the future, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Despite all the odds, they had survived. They had faced death and despair, and yet they had refused to give up. And now, they were building a new future, one that was based on cooperation, trust, and hope. The survival probability counter, which had once seemed so bleak, now held a glimmer of hope. It was a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there was always a chance for a better tomorrow. And as long as they continued to fight, as long as they refused to give up, they would find a way to survive. Chapter 8, The Tides of Change. November 15th, 2026. Months had passed since the alliance with Ana Velasquez's community, and while the initial promise of cooperation brought relief, new challenges emerged. The Share hydroelectric generator, which powered the combined camp's ventilation and basic lighting, began to malfunction. The constant vibrations from the cave's occasional tremors had loosened critical components, and with limited spare parts, repairs became a race against time. Emma Carter, now a seasoned leader with visible lines of stress etched on her face, gathered the council from both communities. The meeting took place in a newly expanded cavern, where makeshift benches made from scavenged metal and wooden planks served as seating. The generator's output has dropped by 30%, she informed the group, her voice echoing in the dimly lit space. Without it, we'll have to ration power severely, which means cutting back on hydroponic systems and ventilation. Anna, twirling a piece of frayed rope between her fingers, nodded in agreement. My people have been scouring the area for parts, but everything useful has been picked clean. We might need to consider deconstructing some non-essential equipment for components. Dr. Mei Lin, who had been silently studying a clipboard filled with data, finally looked up. If we reduce the power to the hydroponics lights by half, the crops will grow slower, but they'll still survive. However, any further reduction, and we risk losing the entire harvest. Survival probability, 16%. Lily Harper, now a crucial part of the scientific team assisting Dr. Lin, spent her days in a combined laboratory. She was currently working on a project to genetically modify the bioluminescent mushrooms they had discovered earlier, hoping to increase their nutritional value. One afternoon, as she was examining a sample under a microscope, Maya, Anna's daughter, burst into the lab. "Hey, you won't believe what we found," Maya exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. A group of us were exploring an old storage room in our camp, and we stumbled upon a crate full of pre-disaster textbooks. There's one on advanced agriculture. Lily's face lit up. That could be a game changer. We might find new techniques to improve our crop yields. The two girls immediately rushed to show the discovery to Dr. Lin. Meanwhile, tensions began to rise between the younger members of the two communities. A friendly competition over a makeshift ball game turned into a heated argument, fueled by pent-up frustration and the daily struggles of survival. Shouts echoed through the cave corridors as accusations of cheating flew back and forth. Gareth Hume, who still held a position of influence among some of the more aggressive-minded survivors, saw an opportunity. "This is what happens when you try to mix different groups," he said to a small gathering of his followers. "We should focus on our own people and take what we need to survive, instead of relying on these so-called allies." His words spread like wildfire, causing a rift within the combined community. Emma, alerted to the growing unrest, called an emergency town hall meeting. Standing on a raised platform, she addressed the crowd. "I know these are difficult times, but we've come too far to let petty arguments and mistrust tear us apart. We're stronger together. Remember why we formed this alliance in the first place, to survive." But not everyone was convinced. Some survivors, swayed by Garrett's rhetoric, began to distance themselves from the joint activities and resource sharing. The fragile balance that had been carefully maintained was on the verge of collapsing. 8 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The situation worsened when a scouting party returned with news of another survivor group moving into the area. This group, led by a man named Dimitri, was rumored to be highly organized and well-armed. "They're setting up camp about 10 miles east of here," reported Lieutenant Riley, his expression grave. "And they've been marking their territory, warning other groups to stay away." The council debated the threat posed by Dimitri's group. Anna proposed a cautious approach, suggesting they send a diplomatic delegation to establish communication. "Maybe we can offer them a place in our alliance," she said. "The more people we have working together, the better our chances of survival." Emma, however, was hesitant. "We don't know anything about them. For all we know, they could be planning to attack us and take our resources. We need to fortify our defenses and be prepared for the worst." As the community prepared for a potential threat, the internal conflict continued to simmer. Gareth and his followers became more vocal in their opposition to the alliance, and there were several near-violent confrontations between them and those who supported cooperation. 1,500 hours universal time coordinated. In the midst of the chaos, Lily and Maya made a significant discovery. Using the knowledge from a newly found textbooks, they managed to develop a new method of soil fertilization. By combining the bioengineered moss with some of the natural minerals found in the cave, they created a nutrient-rich mixture that could potentially boost crop growth. Dr. Lin was ecstatic. "This could solve our food problem," she said, holding up a sample of the new fertilizer. "If we can scale this up, we might even have enough to trade with other communities." The news spread quickly, and for a moment, it seemed like the community's focus shifted away from the internal strife. But Gareth, not willing to let go of his agenda, tried to downplay the discovery. "This is just a temporary fix," he told his followers. "We still need to look out for ourselves first." 2,000 hours universal time coordinated. As night fell, the cave was plunged into darkness when the malfunctioning generator finally gave out completely. Panic spread as survivors fumbled for flashlights and candles. In the confusion, a small fire broke out in one of the storage areas, likely caused by a carelessly placed candle. The combined community rushed to extinguish the fire, and in the process, something unexpected happened. People from both groups, forgetting their differences for a moment, worked side by side to save their home. Emma watched as Anna helped carry buckets of water, and Garrett directed a team to create a fire break. After the fire was put out, the silence that followed was pregnant with possibility. Emma stepped forward. "Tonight, we saw what we're capable of when we work together. We can overcome any obstacle, whether the malfunctioning generator, a potential threat from another group, or our own internal divisions. Let's not waste this opportunity." Slowly, the survivors began to nod in agreement. The tides of change were shifting once again in the community, battered but resilient, prepared to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The survival probability counter, though still precarious 16%, seemed less daunting in the face of newfound unity. Chapter 9, The Long Dawn, December 21st, 2026. The winter solstice brought with it the harshest conditions yet. The Oregon caves, once a haven, now felt like a tomb as temperatures dropped to -20 degrees Celsius outside, and the cave's natural insulation struggled to keep the interior above freezing. The hydroelectric generator, repaired using parts scavenged from Dimitri's abandoned camp, hummed weakly, providing just enough power for minimal ventilation and the hydroponics lights. Emma Carter stood at the cave entrance, watching ash-laden snow swirl in the wind. The survival probability counter, now a rusted plaque near the generator, read 14%, a testament to the community's resilience, but also a reminder how precarious their situation remained. "Any word from the scouts?" she asked Riley, who had taken on the role of chief of security. "Negative," he replied, stamping his feet to keep warm. "The blizzard's grounding everyone. Dimitri's group could be a mile away, and we'd never know." Survival probability, 14%. Inside the lab, Lily and Maya worked by the light of bioluminescent fungi, testing the new fertilizer on radiation-resistant wheat. The mixture of bioengineered moss and cave minerals had increased yields by 20%, but the plants still grew stunted, their roots twisted by cesium, 137 contamination. "It's better than nothing," Maya said, examining a yellowed leaf. "But we'll need more than this to get through the winter." Dr. Lin entered, rubbing her hands together for warmth. "The latest air quality report is in. Sulfur dioxide levels are up 30%. The volcanic activity's intensifying. We might need to seal the cave entrances tighter." The news spread through the community like wildfire. Gareth Hume, who had been sullen since the fire, saw his chance to regain influence. "I told you this alliance was a mistake," he muttered to a group huddled near the communal stove. "Dimitri's out there waiting to kill us, and our allies can't even keep the air breathable." For a clock universal time coordinated. The attack came with the first break in the storm. Gunfire echoed to the valley at 4 o'clock, followed by the roar of a modified snowmobile engine. Emma grabbed a rifle, her hand steady despite the cold. "To the defenses!" she shouted. "Remember the plan. Focus on their fuel supply." Dimitri's men attacked in waves, using the terrain to their advantage. They targeted the generator first, knowing its destruction would cripple the community. Lily and Maya scrambled to the hydroponics bay, securing the precious crops with tarps as bullets ricocheted off the cave walls. Gareth, however, had other plans. As the battle raged, he and his followers moved toward the storage depot, intent on stealing the last of the emergency rations. "We'll survive on our own," he hissed, prying open a metal trunk. "No more sharing with outsiders." But Ana Velasquez, patrolling perimeter, saw them. "Traitor!" she screamed, raising her crossbow. Before she could fire, a bullet from Dimitri's men struck her shoulder, sending her to the ground. 7 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The tide turned when Riley's team sabotaged the attackers' fuel sled. The explosion lit up the dawn, and Dimitri's men, realizing their vulnerability, retreated. By sunrise, the cave stood victorious, but the cost was steep. 5 dead, including 2 children, and Ana lying unconscious from her injury. Emma knelt beside Ana, pressing the dressing to her wound. "Why?" she asked Gareth, who was being held by guards. "Why betray us now?" "Because you're naive," he spat, "trusting others won't save us. Only strength will." Emma sighed, standing up wearily. "Strength without unity is just noise, Gareth. And noise gets people killed." 12 o'clock Universal Time Coordinated. The winter dragged on, but the community clung together. Lily and Dr. Lin perfected the fertilizer, using volcanic ash to create a protective barrier around the roots of crops. The bioluminescent wheat, though still misshapen, began to thrive in the nutrient-rich soil, its glow brighter than ever, a symbol of resilience. In March 2027, the first signs of ecological recovery appeared. A scout reported seeing a herd of deer in the Cascade Mountains, their coats mottled but alive. The animals were smaller than their pre-disaster counterparts, their behavior cautious. But they were a sign that life was adapting, just like the survivors. Survival probability, 18%. By summer, the ozone layer, though still thin, showed patches of recovery. The ash storms lessened, and for the first time in 2 years, the sun rose as more than a dim red orb. Its light, filtered through the remaining stratospheric ash, cast a gentle gold over the landscape. Emma stood at the cave entrance, watching Lily and Maya plant the first seeds of the improved wheat outside. The girls laughed as a breeze carried the first non-radioactive snowmelt down the mountainside. "It's still not safe," Lily said, "but it's a start." "Yes," Emma agreed, "a long, slow start." December 21st, 2027. 1 year after the solstice attack, the community gathered in the central cavern for the first harvest celebration. The tables were laden with misshapen but edible crops, and the air smelled of cooked grain, a luxury they thought lost. Dr. Lin raised a cup of purified water in a toast. To survival, not just of the fittest, but of the most stubborn. Laughter echoed through the cave, mingling with the hum of the now reliable generator. Outside, the first real snow of the season fell, clean and white, covering the ash in a blanket of hope. The survival probability counter, now irrelevant, had been replaced by a simple sign carved into the cave wall. "We grow, we adapt, we endure." In the years that followed, the Oregon Caves community became a beacon for other survivors. They shared their knowledge of radiation-resistant agriculture and water purification, building a network of allied settlements across the Pacific Northwest. The journey was slow, filled with setbacks and losses, but always forward. Lily, now a respected scientist, often visited the cave's astronomical well. where Jack's final transmission data was etched into the stone. She watched the stars, now visible through the recovering ozone layer, and think of the magnetar, the cosmic accident that had nearly destroyed them. We were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, she'd say to anyone who asked, but we made the most of it. And so they did. The dark winter lasted decades, but humanity, ever the tenacious tenant of Earth, learned to thrive in the ashes. They didn't rebuild the world as it was. They built a new one, forged in radiation and resilience, where survival was not a probability, but a choice, one they made every single day. The last entry in Jack's journal, found years later in the Oregon Caves lab, read, "The universe is indifferent, but we are not. We burn, we grow, we endure, and that, perhaps, is enough. Survival probability. Infinity